Debbie Melnyk with VCSQI, and today's Milestone class is focused on staff engagement, teamwork, and joy. These are milestones 6 and 19 for the specialty assessment tool, and 6 and 24 for primary care. Just a reminder about the milestones on slide 2. There are a total of 22 for specialty practices and 27 for primary care. Scores on each milestone determine phase completion. For example, milestone 13 is the only milestone associated with phase 1, and a score of 3 is necessary to complete phase 1. Other phases require various scores for other milestones. Summarizing our milestone classes, here on slide 3, you see that we've already completed the class on quality improvement strategies and actions, and also on the improvement goals. This week, we're focused on staff engagement. After this week, there will be 5 more classes, and you can see them broken out here, identifying patient risk and using best practices next week, followed by streamlining clinical and office work, then person and family-centered care, followed by coordinated care, with the last class focused on business strategies. On slide 4, we see today's objectives. This is to review the scoring for the 2 staff-related milestones, to outline strategies for meeting each of these milestones, and to review the relevance of the 2 milestone scores to phases. I'm now going to turn the mic over to my colleague, Ivan Berkel.
Thank you, Debbie. For today, we have 2 milestones that we're going to discuss. Milestone 6. Does the practice set clear expectations for each team member's functions and responsibilities to optimize efficiency, outcomes, and accountability? And milestone number 19 or 24 for primary care, does the practice have effective strategies in place to cultivate joy in work and can document results? The essence of what these 2 milestones are trying to address is this a good place to work? Is it a good environment for staff members with clear roles and responsibilities that will enable them to be successful in their jobs and feel good about it? And for milestone 19, do we have a way of engaging staff, ensuring again that this is a good place to work with a good positive environment for staff to be in, to learn in, and to grow in. So let's take a closer look at the milestones, each one, and see how they're scored and see what some interventions are that we can put in place to make sure that we are addressing these 2 milestones in our practice. So if we jump to the next slide, milestone 6 in more detail. Again, practice sets clear expectations for each member's functions and responsibilities to optimize efficiency, outcomes, and accountability. And again, practices do need to achieve a score of a 3 in order to complete phase 3 of TCPI. A score of a 0 for milestone 6 would indicate that the practice has not established clear roles for each team member. And that's typical of very small practices in their infancy where they haven't really sat down and started to outline who's doing what just yet. A score of a 1 would indicate that the practice has identified the work required before, during, and after patient visits, and identifies who's the correct skills and credentials that are needed to perform that work. A score of a 2 would indicate that the practice has progressed a little bit further than that and has really taken time to match the work that must be done with the team member who will do the work. Even if there are 2 members in the practice with the same skill set, with the same credentials, with the same training, one of them may have strengths in one area of the practice that the other does not. And so it's worthwhile going through all of the roles, the work that must be done, and making sure that we have the most capable person doing it. This applies to providers in the same specialty as well. A score of a 3 would indicate that the practice has written job descriptions, including accountability lanes for each team member's work, just to making sure that they're working to what we call top of license or working to the maximum of their skill set and credentials in order to optimize efficiency and outcomes. So again, the goal for all practices is to get to a score of a 3, where we have actual written job descriptions that outline the roles and responsibilities for each team member. Next slide. So we mentioned that we would be sharing some strategies that have been recommended to help practices address these milestones. If you recall from the TCPI practice plan that you've looked at on your weekly calls with myself or Sherri, or that we've shared with you in the past, on the second tab of the plan, if you look all the way on the right to column H, there's that column is called Driver and Change Package Link. Within each of those items that correspond to a milestone, there is a list of interventions which are recommendations of things that that practice can put in place or begin to implement that would demonstrate progress toward scoring a 3 on that milestone. Next slide, please. So some of those items for milestone 6 include, again, this relates to change package item 1.2.2, inventory the work to be done prior to a patient encounter, during the encounter, and after the encounter. And that could be as easy as just making a list of what needs to be done at what point during the patient visit, and then making sure that each task on that list is assigned to the right person. There's also, we go to step 2, and you'll see an example of this in just a moment, you can use process maps or swim lanes to clarify the roles and responsibilities. What we mean by process maps or swim lanes is to visually outline the process that a patient goes through in the clinic, for example, from scheduling appointment to patient discharge, and outline the different steps that take place throughout that process. And then create lanes or pathways for each skill set, one for the physician, one for the nurse, one for the MA, one for the biller, one for the front desk person, and put each task in the lane for the appropriate staff member. And that's a good way to visually see who does what and have more meaningful conversations about patient flow, throughput. It's also a good way to identify where problems happen and who can help to solve those problems in the practice. Point 3, identify staff interests and talents and align those with available opportunities. This again has to do with staff engagement, with understanding the interests that each staff member has, ways in which they would like to grow, and creating an environment in which they're able to learn and grow on a continuous basis. Point 4, add fields to the registry or the EHR to capture the roles and responsibilities for each team member. This is just a good way to make sure we are documenting these roles. It's good for staff training purposes, and it's good to be able to onboard new staff members as well. Point 5, share team roles with patients and families on paper and electronic systems. That's to build a better relationship between the team members and the patients, and also to help the patients know who is a part of their team, understand what their role is. This will both facilitate staff engagement and patient satisfaction as well. And last, empower MAs with coaching skills so that they can expand their roles in supporting self-management. So the medical assistants, they're typically the ones who bring the patients back, who they spend a bit of time with in the room. Empowering the MAs with coaching skills, one, is going to develop their skill sets to make them more confident in their jobs. And 2, as it says here on the slide, it's going to improve their ability to help the patient engage in their own care and self-management. As we go to the next slide, this is a great example of a swim lane diagram that outlines the patient process from the time the admission order is received till the time the patient is discharged. So this is an example of a swim lane from an inpatient setting, but you can see where it starts with the oval on the left by the physician, and where it ends, patient discharge, the oval on the right, which is within the roles and responsibilities of the nurse. But the way you would complete this as a practice, you would first outline, clarify the beginning points, the end points. So again, patient schedules or patient schedule to patient discharge, identify all of the different steps in the process, and then identify all of the different skill sets involved in the practice. So in this example here, we have the discharge advocate, the physician, the nurse, the pharmacist, the case manager. And then once we've identified all of those different staff levels or skill sets in the practice, we begin to put those tasks into the swim lane. That's what we call those lanes for who does what. And this one is a good way to outline the process and make it visible for everyone, but then it's a clear way to identify who does what. And as we work together on care teams, this will help to facilitate communication amongst team members and a better understanding of the whole process, so that ultimately we are giving the patients a better experience. So again, doing this type of activity is a good way to start to understand the roles and responsibilities for each staff member. And this is a tool that we can use to help us quickly create a written job description that documents the roles and responsibilities. And that again is what we need to satisfy milestone 6 and score 3. For milestone number 19, I'm going to turn the conversation over to my colleague, Sherri White.
Sherri, you might be on mute.
I sure was. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ivan, and good morning, everyone. So milestone 19 of the specialty assessment and milestone 24 of the primary care assessment states that the practice has effective strategies in place to cultivate joy in work and can document results. A score of a 3 is needed to complete phase 4. So what a 3 means is that the practice has implemented strategies to support joy in work and can demonstrate it in the results through metrics, such as staff survey results, high retention rates, or low turnover rates. So before I proceed and give you examples of what are some strategies you can implement in your practice to cultivate joy, I would like to start with a quote. To find joy in work is to discover the fountain of youth. And that is a quote from Pearl S. Buck. So let's go into a couple of examples that would help cultivate joy, keeping that quote in mind. Next slide, please. Okay, this is change package in your practice plan 3.2.3. One of the things you can do, I'm not going to go over each one, and I'm going to also give you some of my own examples, is to celebrate joy or successes. Oftentimes when we have negative feedback, we want to dive in and resolve that. However, many of us never take the time to stop and pause to celebrate the good work someone does. Another thing you can do is have a class with office etiquette. There was one practice I worked for where the morale of the department was just so low. And what the trigger was is that none of the physicians or staff came into the office to say good morning. Also, around Christmas time or the holidays, no one said happy holidays or gave them a card. Just recognizing that person and who they are and what all they do. It's just a simple tactic that doesn't cost a thing. Other things you can do is engage staff in the redesign efforts, help them be empowered to help drive a more effective practice. Promote kindness to each other and to patients. Smile. Always remember to smile. Your staff knows everyone, what they're going through, and they're very mindful of that. However, a smile can change a lot of things. It says smile is contagious. It makes people happier. It is true. There are studies on this. However, negativity is more contagious. So be sure to smile because everyone else feels what you feel. Consider gratitude practices in meetings. Again, that's just putting employees in spotlights. And also, prior to each meeting I used to run for my staff, we had a moment of kudos where we would give shout outs to each other and to ourselves. And that in itself just gave a whole sense of empowerment and joy just to be recognized and be able to call out success that they had as a team and individually. Something that most employees would love is getting a 15-minute massage. That's just shows something a little bit more. Just think about what a massage would do for you. Just 15 minutes would do tremendous work or a feeling of joy for your staff. So I'll go to the next slide and just go over some more. Another example is get provider and staff input at all levels. There are committees that you can organize, for example, a process improvement committee for your staff to help include all the disciplines in your practice to help drive change. That in itself will drive a lot of successes because the staff members involved will feel empowered, as well as those who are not on that committee, because they have a point person they can go to comment and provide feedback on processes that are not going so well. Listening. If a staff member comes to you with a question or concern, just show that you're listening. Employ active listening skill. You can hold social functions together. That includes end of the year celebration of all the work that was accomplished in that year. Staff retreats. There was another practice I was a part of that actually closed down their entire practice for one day every quarter so that all of their staff can meet to hear the same message from the CEO or the physicians. And that was very intriguing and exciting to see. It did boost the morale. Use incentive plans to reward participation, multiple points. There are several programs or applications that you can use to help drive this in your practice. And if you're interested in it, I'll be happy to share the names. I can't recall the names of the organizations or the companies that support this. Use shout outs, walls of success. Again, this is just recognizing and putting a specific employee in spotlight. Or another way to phrase this specific measure or idea is an employee of the month. Giving out certificates would also help to drive joy in work. Involve staff in developing for other staff. So that's staff training, shadowing. When a new person on boards, maybe have them have a partner who's already there where they go to lunch with them and just give them a whole overview of the organization or the practice. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was a few examples as it relates to cultivating team and cultivating joy in the workplace. Ivan, Debbie, and I will be happy to help you implement any of these strategies into your practice. And now I'll turn the floor over to you guys for any questions or concerns.
One question that I often hear from practices is, do you have an example of a job description that you could share? Just because, there's not a lot of resources out there with templates for them to follow. And a lot of our practices are starting from scratch when they're creating job descriptions. So let me take a moment and just share with you an example. I'm going to share my screen for just a moment. Let me share an example I received from one of our practices, Options Rehab, a New Jersey-based practice. They were addressing Milestone 6, and I believe they had 6 different positions in the practice that they were creating job descriptions for from scratch. And so here's just an outline of their job description. I'll talk to the second part. The third part, roles and responsibilities, that's where they spent a bulk of the time. But this one just has, very simply, who the position reports to, a brief overview of the job. And this becomes very helpful when posting job descriptions, either online or in or in print. Now, the responsibilities and duties, I'm not going to go through each one, but I'm going to briefly talk through the process they went through to capture this information. What they did is they sat down with the staff. They mentioned that we needed to develop written job descriptions for each role. What they did was ask each member just to take a few minutes and jot down the tasks, just the tasks that came to mind that they did each and every day. And they did that at the start of the day. At the end of the day, they asked them to go through that list again and validate that they actually did what they wrote on that list and include any additional tasks or things that were requested of them that day. After they did that on day one, they did the same thing the second day, just to make sure they had a comprehensive list that covered all of the tasks that they did. On day three, they went through their lists, each of them, one by one, and started to prioritize their specific lists by workload. So the activity or the task that you did the most or spent the most amount of time on was at the top. And that way each staff member had a list of what they did. The fourth day, they all brought their lists together, sat in a room, read down their list to make sure that there was no overlap. If there was, they talked about it, they resolved it that day or during that meeting. And where there were any gaps, they assigned those roles to someone else just to make sure that there was full coverage for everything that needed to be done in the practice. After that work group session, they had a clear written list of bullet points for what needed to be included in each job description. They typed those up on a Friday, and the entire process took a couple hours of staff time in total, but took a week for the practice to complete. And so this list, as I scroll down, shows just briefly the roles and responsibilities for the biller. And then you see that list took just a bit less than a page, and then the qualifications, education, and experience. That's a little bit easier to come up with. So I just wanted to share that example of a basic template that a practice can use to create and document roles and responsibilities for each task member.
That is a nice example, not only of a completed job description, but thank you for describing the process they went through, Ivan.
Oh.
They really, and it's interesting, it's another example. How they did it is an example of one of Sherri's strategies that she covered for Joy in Work. They included the staff, and they let the staff come together and talk about it and really create the job description. So that empowers the staff and usually makes people feel good. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you. We hope this session today was helpful to all of you. Next week, we'll be going to Milestone class number 4. And my computer will not advance for some reason. Let's see, I'll do it this way. So our class next week will focus on identifying patient risk and using best practices. And so here you see that the 2 for primary care, there are some additional ones. I mean, the 2 for specialty care, there are additional ones we will also cover for primary care. Thank you very much. You know how to find each of us if you have questions later on regarding staff and the milestones we covered today.